Hello class, this is Chapter 2, Inside Police Agencies, Understanding Mission and Culture. The objectives we're going to cover in this class are as follows. We will understand how police spend the majority of their time. We will explain how the makeup of the police force has changed in recent years. And we will identify the sources that affect and shape the police image. We will also explain how and why discretion is exercised by police agencies and their officers. We will learn how to recognize when police are authorized to use force and the level and amount of force allowed. And finally, we will list and describe the building blocks of ethics. Adhering to professional oaths and codes of conduct is an integral part of policing. Even small ethical violations can result in people's rights being denied, confidence in the police being completely eroded, and communities being made less safe because they feel no safety from the police at all. Although police officers are the professionals discussed in this chapter, the concepts apply equally to all others in law enforcement, such as deputies or sheriffs or highway patrol. Let's talk about the police mission. Why do law enforcement agencies exist? Fighting crime versus service to the public is always an issue. The majority of police actions actually have little to do with criminal law enforcement and instead involve service to the community. There are neighborhood cops, and then there are special ops. The proactive or reactive controversy can be seen in the existence of two contradictory models in policing. You have community policing, and then you have SWAT, which is Special Weapons and Tactics teams. Now, who are the police? They are representative of the communities that they serve. Traditionally, police officers have been a fairly homogeneous group, white, male with a high school education, and not always, but often a military background. The number of women and minorities going into law enforcement has increased over the past several decades. More officers are also as interested in helping people as they are in fighting crime, and greater emphasis is being placed on embracing a guardian mindset as opposed to a warrior approach to policing. Here's a question for you to consider. Now, you can either divide into study groups, or you can consider this question on your own. But you need to consider and also discuss actions to increase minority participation in law enforcement. And I would encourage you to go on Zoom or meet as a study group over the phone to have each group represent their ideas. Now let's talk about the police culture. There are negative perceptions of the police culture. Solidarity or loyalty and secrecy within a police department can lead to a culture of denial among police officers who may overlook issues of violence or patterns of abuse perpetuated by fellow officers. This can breed distrust and suspiciousness of citizens, a tendency to assess people and situations in terms of their potential threat. There can also be an attitude of lay low or cover your ass attitude, which we see between fellow police officers. We also see a we versus them attitude, police versus the public, and often, too often, a code of silence, which I just mentioned, where police officers tend to overlook misbehavior by other officers. Now, there are positive perceptions of the police culture where you see an outlook that suggests a positive view of police culture that values duty, dedication, and self-sacrifice. This means that there are police who are successful at calling out quote-unquote bad people or quote-unquote bad apples from their ranks because they believe in duty, honor, dedication, and self-sacrifice. These are the police that people call when they need help. These are the police that they want to respond. And they also are the police that people want to keep domestic enemies at bay. Now let's talk about researching police officer attitudes. Pauline's research in 2004, which is written in detail in your book, and also I suggest you research this and read about it, has called into question the assumptions that have been made about a monolithic police culture that involves tough cops that are strictly crime fighters. They avoid community service and would rather just stick to fighting crime. They also are problem solvers and professionals as well. Now let's talk about the police image in terms of personal contacts. Although the public has many stereotypes of the police, these stereotypes are shattered or reinforced each time a citizen has a personal contact with a police officer. The public expectations are written about in Scogan 2005, which you also need to read about, and describes 4 expectations of citizens, all of which are elements of procedural justice. When it comes to personal contact with the police, each of these contacts are affected by individual backgrounds, media, and personal experiences. They're also shaped by police appearance, behavior, and actions. There's also negative police novelty items that cause confrontations between police and community, and negative contacts between the police and the public in general. It is definitely true that more positive contacts are needed, especially given the culture of 2020, which we are in right now. Now, continuing with public expectations of the police image, there are reasons for police discretion. Discretion is important to maintain good community relations. There have been changes in police discretion, where community policing has had a great impact on police discretion as a whole. The downside of police discretion is that officers usually work independently without direct supervision and have tremendous power to decide what action they will take. There's also abuse of discretion. In 2014, the U.S. Department of Justice launched an investigation into the policies and practices of the Ferguson Police Department. Then there is discretion and the police image. Unless the police exercise their discretion with care, the community may complain about an actual or perceived abuse of power or discrimination in the way that police enforce the law. Police are expected to win the wars on crime, drugs, and terrorism, but they are given no control over the causes of these problems. Those are socioeconomic problems which need to be addressed at a different level and by agencies other than the police themselves. Now let's look at some of the reasons for police discretion. Statute books are filled with archaic and ambiguous laws. There are not enough police to act on every violation. Police must prioritize the offenses on which they act. This is important in maintaining good community relations. There have been changes in police discretion. There have been public mandates to strictly enforce DWI laws or DUI laws, and laws are now strictly upheld, those being spouse beating and also physical and sexual abuse of children. Now, the downside of police discretion is that officers usually work independently. There used to be a police officer and a partner in a single police unit. Now they operate independently. So they have tremendous power to decide what action they will take, who they will arrest, and which laws they will enforce. And there's no partner there to say yes or no, this is correct or incorrect, or you're treading on ethical quicksand, etc. Because officers work independently, there is often no one to review and appraise non-enforcement decisions, and this is essential to the functioning rules of law in our system of criminal justice. So perhaps one solution is to look at putting 2 police officers back into a single unit. It's an ongoing debate. Now, as far as discretion in the police image, they're there to serve the community, and there are severe community relation problems that develop if the community believes that the police overlook violations committed by a certain segment of society, and or the police strictly enforce laws against another segment of society. Discretion increases as one moves down the organizational hierarchy, and the most critical discretionary decisions an officer can make is when and how much force to use. Now here's a good discussion question, or a question for you to consider. What are the pitfalls of police discretion? As a police chief, put yourself in their shoes. As a police chief, how can you address concerns about proper use of discretion? Let's talk now about use of force. Use of force comes with great responsibility, and officers are trained in a wide range of possible actions, from mere presence to the use of deadly force. And this is discussed at length in your text. Please make sure that you read through this section of your text carefully. Now, to the extent concerning police brutality, this is considered differently by urban and suburban, rich and poor, and minority and majority populations. Now, there's a very famous experiment called Philip Zimbardo's Stanford Prison Experiment of 1971, and it is highly controversial. If you don't know anything about it, you absolutely should. But one of the things that it produced was what has come to be known as the Lucifer effect, which is the transformation of good people into evil ones. It is very important that you read and understand this experiment and the impact that it had on policing in general, and it was a very important study as far as psychology is concerned as well. Now, as far as ethical policing, there are building blocks of ethics: integrity, honesty, values, standards, courage, and civility. These are the building blocks of ethics. Now let's talk about ethics in the field. Moves towards higher ethical standards in many police departments mean that more and more departments require college degrees, and an increasing dialogue within the police community on ethics in general. And then there are ethics check questions. Is a situation and how it was handled ethically, is it legal? Is it balanced? And as far as how I acted as a police officer, how will it make me feel about myself? Did I follow good ethics or did I not? Then there are ethical dilemmas. One is where the ends justify the means, and that has been a controversy since the dawn of man practically. But it is a dilemma that police face every single day. Do the ends justify the means? Police are often granted special privileges and allowed exceptions to the law, although that has become under more and more scrutiny in more recent years. Now here's a good discussion question or question for you to consider. Either divide into study groups and meet by phone or over Zoom, or it's a question you can consider yourself. Answer this question in terms of combating terrorism. Do the ends justify the means? Now, continuing with ethical policing, as far as police corruption is concerned, there's a slippery slope. There are seemingly benign actions that can escalate. Loyalty can overcome integrity, and entitlement or a sense of entitlement by police can overcome accountability. There's also approved deviance. This can evolve among officers, pulling rookies into a police subculture. And then there is the issue of handling police complaints. This has brought about the Independent Police Complaints Commission, or the IPCC. Typically, police complaints are handled internally by internal affairs, but as scrutiny by the public has increased, the advent of the Independent Police Complaints Commission has come about, where these complaints are more out in the open and are discussed more publicly than they used to be in the past. There are also other investigative commissions. Too often, implemented reforms are unfortunately only temporary. The Knapp Commission and the Mullen Commission uncovered widespread corruption in the New York City Police Department. You need to read about these two commissions. Also, the Christopher Commission and the Rampart Board of Inquiry were involved in the LAPD, or Los Angeles Police Department, following the Rodney King and Rampart scandals. Those you absolutely need to read and know about as well. Now, to summarize, community policing will require a change in mission statement, departmental organization, and leadership style. Solidarity and secrecy within a police department can result in a code of silence, which can often lead to very detrimental problems. We also talked about how police image is affected by individual personal contact. And we also discussed how ethics involves integrity, honesty, values, standards, courage, and civility. Now, there are a lot of controversial things that we discussed in this chapter, and what I mean by controversial is that it talks about not only the history of change that has occurred in policing, but also ongoing changes and pressures of society that are occurring right now as of 2020 when this was recorded. You need to make sure also that you read about the various commissions that I mentioned, their outcomes, their findings, etc. As always, please contact your instructor if you have any needs that are not answered by the text itself or answered by research that you've done on your own. Thank you as always for your time, and we'll see you next chapter.